Hi, I'm Adrian Atkinson and this is Jamaica Magazine. This week on Issues, we get the answers to the new tax package.
And there are essentially two ways to pay for a budget. You either tax people directly as they earn the income, or you tax them indirectly when they spend it. How do we decide which of those two to do? Well, the advantage of taxing people when they spend it is that all the people who are not on PAYE, who are not forced to pay taxes automatically because their companies deduct it, all the people who are self-employed and own account and have small businesses and are freelancers and hustlers that earn enough money to owe income taxes and don't pay it, taxing consumption captures all of those people.
Then later, the country's reaping benefits of the Fiscal Prudence program. We tell you more. Stay with us for those features and others.
Want to know the law pertaining to renting a house? What about the procedure if you're arrested? Or what is defined as corruption? Then click on the Ministry of Justice website. It has information on every law passed in Jamaica. The House of Parliament portal also has the more recent year's pieces of legislation. The sites are easy to search and the files are downloadable. Make access to justice your business. Know your rights.
This is one time we don't want you to laugh.
Staying safe on the road is a serious thing.
Mr. Taxi driver and bus driver, take time, man. People, so one-stop driver and come off.
Cyclists, motorcyclists, pedestrian, all road users using the head.
Only if you use cell phone and drive. No, man.
Idiot thing that.
Road safety is no laughing matter.
Because we want you to be around
And laughing with us for a long time.
A message from the National Road Safety Council and National Health Fund.
Indirect or direct taxation, what does it mean to your earnings? How will this new tax package drive economic growth? To answer those questions and more, economist Dr. Damien King is with us. Watch this.
Thanks for joining us for Issues and Answers. I'm Ian Boyne. Today we talk about the government's tax package and the budget which was recently presented. We have with us the co-executive director of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, Dr. Damien King. We thank you so much for your company. Dr. King, good to have you on the program. Do you believe that this budget continues to take us on the right course, the course of macroeconomic stability, or will there be some disruption with that course?
Well, let us look at the courses and make a judgment about each one. So the first course is on the path to debt reduction. Everybody in Jamaica now knows, not from academic inquiries, but from our own experience over the last 15 years, that high debt is not a route to quality public services and economic growth. So the country has embarked on a course of debt reduction from the 1.5 times GDP that it was 5 years ago.
Yes.
This debt continues that process.
Okay.
For the new fiscal year, the debt to GDP ratio will have come down by 30 percentage points from the peak of 5 years ago.
To 120.
So to 116 by the time the new budget comes in. So that's one course, and it does so by aiming for a high, what they call a primary surplus, which essentially is just the budget balance if you leave out interest payments.
Yes. So 7%.
So the first thing you want to know is it going to hit that target and continue debt reduction? And the answer is yes. So that's one course that is clearly the right course. The other course it's on, which is more controversial, is the shift in who is paying for the budget. And there are essentially two ways to pay for a budget. You either tax people directly as they earn the income, or you tax them indirectly when they spend it. How do we decide which of those two to do? Well, the advantage of taxing people when they spend it is that all the people who are not on PAYE, who are not forced to pay taxes automatically because their companies deduct it. All the people who are self-employed and own account and have small businesses and are freelancers and hustlers that earn enough money to owe income taxes and don't pay it, taxing consumption captures all of those people. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is that you end up taxing people who have such low incomes that they really ought not to be paying taxes in any case. And they end up paying it because you're taxing the consumption goods. So the shift from taxing income to taxing consumption is one of the directions that the budgets are moving in. It started last year. It continues this year. Well, whether you think that's good or not really comes down to whether you think taxing people who really can't afford it, a small amount in absolute terms but large to them, is worth the benefit of bringing all the people outside the tax net into it, all the people who are not paying enough taxes.
Yes, yeah, that certainly is the issue. And you would say, therefore, that the concerns, because there are concerns about the effects of this move to indirect taxation, the effects that it has on the poor, on the unemployed, on the lower middle class certainly, who wouldn't be covered by PATH. Would you say that the benefits of going the indirect taxation route outweigh the costs?
It is difficult to make a definitive judgment on that.
Benefits to the economy as a whole?
Yeah, well, it's difficult.
Individuals.
You can't make decisions like that by simply narrowing down just the economy alone. I mean, let's agree that we all have some kind of moral obligation to the neediest. But it's not just a moral obligation, you know. No economy is going to sustain growth for a very long time.
Yes, it leaves out.
By leaving behind those who have been marginalized by history. So at some point, even if you get a little bit of growth, unless everybody is included, it's going to come to a halt. Going to come to a halt, not just for social reasons of social harmony, but for economic reasons.
Absolutely, under consumption.
So we can make the shift from income taxes to consumption taxes because it is more efficient. But as you do so, you really have to have confidence that in between your increased social spending, in between your PATH program, and whatever else you have, you really are comprehensively mitigating and addressing the needs of that section of the population. And I don't know, as much as the increase in the PATH program is welcomed, and we'll hope for more as that goes along, you know, we just don't have the confidence yet that we are really including all of those people.
Yes. We're going to take a break at this point, Dr. King. When we come back, we're going to talk about the government's move to bring in the resources of the public bodies in the consolidated fund. We're speaking today a well-known economist, Dr. Damien King, co-executive director of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute. We take a break, but we'll be right back.
Nutritious food, succulent dishes, superior workmanship, and excellent service. Jamaica is on the go. Let's grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Let's harness the indomitable spirit of our most valued resource, our people. Let's support our local businesses. After all, buying Jamaican means building Jamaica. Original.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Dr. Damien King, co-executive director of CAPRI. Dr. King, the matter of moving the resources of our public bodies to a central fund rather than keeping those funds within the bodies themselves. What is your take on that?
Well, here are the considerations. When you have a country in which fiscal resources have been tight, everybody who has a public service to deliver wants to carve out funds for themselves so that, that their particular obligation is adequately funded. That sort of makes sense from the point of view of each of the individual units and organizations and agencies. And fiscal resources have been tight in Jamaica for a long time. So over time, we end up creating a lot of special purpose funds. Taxation that is earmarked for a particular purpose, like Chase, like the Tourism Enhancement Fund, like the NHT.
Yes.
The problem with doing that, while it guarantees funds for all of these purposes, the problem is that it doesn't allow a government at any point in time to weigh on equal terms competing demands for its expenditure because it doesn't have access to the total pool of funds. So how do you weigh the need for drugs at the Kingston Public Hospital against a legitimate need to keep the verges tidy on some highway that tourists and residents on the North Coast drive on?
Yes.
It's a legitimate need, but you have at some point to be able to weigh those two against each other. And so while we understand why funds were separated, there's an argument for pooling them.
And isn't there a connection also between our pooling them and the creation of the public debt? Hasn't historically one of the reasons for the creation of the public debt been the fact that some of these public bodies themselves have run up huge deficits?
Well,
and then the central government has to come in and bail them out.
Well, whatever the argument for separated funding, it's an inefficient way of managing your funds when you have tight resources. So, you know, at the same time, until very recently, when the government being highly indebted and having to go back to the market to borrow money to roll over its existing debt, had to be borrowing at 18%, we had public bodies that had surplus funds sitting in low interest accounts. So
the government could have used those funds rather than borrowing high cost funds.
Yes.
Yeah. People are a bit uneasy, Dr. King, about the government's tax on fuel, on electricity, on these sensitive areas. And they feel, you know, why the government didn't choose other means. But an argument might be made that the certainty of the collection from these areas is a strong argument for going there, rather than going to some areas where, you know, the elasticity of demand is different.
The effectiveness consideration, the efficiency consideration, is powerful in a country where it's difficult to collect taxes. And let's use the petrol tax as an example.
Yes.
And compare it to, say, the income tax. The labor force is 1.3 million persons. Many of those people have more than one source of income. So what you're really talking about is something like nearly 2 million points of collection. Even though a lot of them would fall below the income tax threshold, the government still needs to have the information on them to know that their income is below the threshold. Now compare 2 million points of collection to the petrol tax. The petrol tax has 1 point of collection, and that's Petrojam. And I'm sure it is the obligation of Petrojam's courier to send a check to the government. So the cost of collecting that tax is effectively zero. And it is nearly impossible to evade. Everybody relies on transportation in some form. Whether you roll up in a Hummer that drinks gas, or you ride a bicycle and buy a loaf of bread, and there's a tiny bit of it in the loaf of bread. So in a country where there's so much informal activity and so much hustling and it's so difficult to collect taxes, there's a huge efficiency argument to things like the petrol tax, to things like the GCT on electricity, and that has some, that has some importance.
So in terms of the certainty of collection, you would say that is the way to go if you don't want to be missing your projections as a finance minister?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the equity consideration is equally important in a society like Jamaica. So the guidance that comes from this is that if you're going to go in that direction, you have to make sure that you're dealing with the equity concerns somewhere else in your budget. And the better way to do it is on the expenditure side, where it can be targeted.
Yes. So as in a part program.
I mean, if you don't tax petrol, you're literally, adequately, you're literally giving a benefit to the wealthiest who drive the biggest vehicles and therefore enjoy most of that benefit. Whereas, there's nobody who lives in Cherry Gardens who's on the PATH program.
Yes.
However much you can complain about the targeting at the margins, nobody in Cherry Gardens is on it. Yes. Whereas when you return the tax side and you give, GCT exemptions, then lots of people who live in Cherry Gardens are going to get that benefit.
So the way in which the government is moving in terms of taxation, you would say, is a more equitable way.
Well, no. I'm saying it's a more efficient way.
Efficient way.
They have to ensure that the equity is taken care of somewhere else.
In terms of the social programs.
Yeah.
Always interested in talking with you. Dr. Damian King is Co-Executive Director of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI. We thank you for your company. Until next week, Ian Bourne wishing you a very pleasant day.
I'm young, gifted, and violence-free.
I will stand up for peace. No matter what you say, you can't take that away.
I'm young, gifted, and violence-free.
I choose to live.
I choose to be me.
Jamaica continues to meet the economic performance targets and structural benchmarks set under the precautionary standby agreement with the IMF. The agreement serves to support the country on its journey to economic growth. Results on the first review under the agreement in this next feature.
Jamaica continues to be on a steady economic growth path, achieving stringent targets set under the precautionary standby agreement with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF.
The fiscal performance is outperforming and remains positive. Monetary performance in terms of the net international reserves and the non-borrowed reserves also is positive. Inflation is within range. The structural benchmarks have been met under the program.
October to December 2016 represents the first IMF semi-annual review period under the new precautionary standby agreement. Co-chair of the Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, Keith Duncan, says the numbers are looking good. During the period, gross domestic product is estimated to have increased by 1.5%. Central government generated a primary surplus balance of $76.6 billion, exceeding the target by $22.6 billion or 42%. Tax revenue intake remained buoyant as collections exceeded the target of $300 billion. At the end of December 2016, non-borrowed reserves remained strong at nearly $1.7 million, exceeding the target of $1.4 million. The calendar year inflation rate of 1.7% was within the projected range. Based on those and other economic markers, EPOC says Jamaica met all quantitative performance criteria and structural benchmarks for that first IMF review period.
All structural benchmarks that were due at the end of December 2016 were met. And these were actually two structural benchmarks. One was the new rates and bands for property taxes under the 2013 land valuations, which were completed and submitted to Cabinet in December 2016, and the operationalization of the Financial Systems Stability Committee by finalizing the appointment of 2 external members by November 2016.
The Financial System Stability Committee will ensure that the financial sector stands up and remains stable in the event of shocks, disruptions, or crises.
So, if we are to sum this up in terms of our targets, the members of the Economic Program Oversight Committee are very comfortable that Jamaica has met its quantitative performance criteria targets, the structural benchmarks of the program for the first review period ending December 2016. We are quite confident and hopeful that we will continue to build on this solid platform going into the second review period ending June 2017.
Leading up to that, the country will have to issue a consultation paper for a resolution framework for systematically important financial institutions in the event of failure and establish a financial inclusion council by March 31.
In the event of a crisis, a fallout, whatever, that may occur in the financial services, how would, it's almost like a living will, how in a structured and a program manner would financial institutions be allowed to be managed to ensure that at the end of a crisis that the depositor, the investor, is not at risk.
The Council is to implement the Cabinet-approved Umbrella Financial Inclusion Strategy for the period 2016 to 2020.
We are all aware that 34% of Jamaica is underbanked or don't have an account with a commercial bank. The Financial Inclusion Council's objectives are to, one, to give access to insurance, credit, savings. We see mobile money, we see the whole agent framework. So this is to get to the underbanked.
Jamaica, achieving sustained success in meeting timelines for structural benchmarks and measures under the precautionary standby agreement with the IMF, laying a solid platform for sustainable economic growth.
We want a productive Jamaica. We are not productive Jamaicans. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity is the way to go for all us Jamaicans. Small business, big business, old and young, we are tell every woman and man. We want growth and prosperity for a better nation with a building plan. So we can build our product and sell our product and put more money in our hand. Our economy can rise to a level and build a better nation. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity.
Productivity, Pathway to Prosperity. A message brought to you by the Jamaica Productivity Center, a department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
No matter how difficult you think your life is, there are always others who are less fortunate and who may even need your help. There are many ways to assist those in need. Right now, if you go in your closet, you may find clothes you haven't worn in a while. If they are in good condition, you can consider donating them. Consider the less fortunate when you go grocery shopping this month and buy some non-perishable items and drop them off at the nearest charitable organization or shelter. Sometimes giving back doesn't even have to cost anything. You may volunteer giving some of your time. Let's be of more help to each other as we seek to become the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
Finger-licking jerk chicken, Helcher fish and bami, we run down yam and banana, roast breadfruit, sweet potato pudding. Jamaica food sweet. So let's make a pledge to use more local produce and less foreign goods. Let's grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Have you been a victim of sexual assault? Have you been raped? It doesn't matter if you're a boy, girl, man, or woman. There's a team of personnel willing and capable to assist you on the path to justice. The Victim Services Division. They provide support of all kinds, such as free, confidential counseling and assistance to attend court. You may not forget the ordeal, but the healing process will be easier. In any 1 year, more than 10,000 people get assistance. Don't hang your head in shame. Being a victim of a sex crime is not your fault. Contact the Victim Services Division. They're based at 47E Old Hope Road, Kingston 5.
In spite of all our differences, along with all our problems, I believe. And despite the crime and violence and men and women dying, I believe. From the boots of Dolphin Mountains, let all our voices ring. Oh, I believe. I believe that we can make a change and spread a gleam of hope across our country. I believe that we can join our hands and make a difference in Jamaica. I believe. There's nothing wrong with Jamaica that makes this what is right. Oh, I believe. And regardless of our struggles, we can rise again. Oh, I believe. Others believed in us, but we must also sing. Oh, I believe. I believe that we can make a change and spread a gleam of hope across our country. I believe that we can join our hands and make a difference in Jamaica. I believe. I believe. The steam in every paper, ants in every classroom, I believe. Oh, priests in all our churches, God in all our homes, I believe. It's time to claim our nation and start a reformation. I believe. I believe that we can make a change and spread a gleam of hope across our country. I believe that we can join our hands and make a difference in Jamaica.
This is where we close the pages for today's show. Before we go, we leave this thought with you. Live life to the fullest and focus on the positive. Makes sense. Remember, the information continues to flow on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You may also download our app from the Google Play Store, or for more features, click on our YouTube channel or visit our webpage, jis.gov.jm. I'm Adrian Atkinson. Happy Sunday.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.